Today we'll be learning z-score calculations. Now the question says, scores on the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, aka a standard IQ test, for the 20 to 34 age group are approximately distributed with U equaling 110 and O equaling 25. Now U is mean in this scenario and O is the standard distribution. Now from this first little section, we learn that yes, U equals 110 and O equals 25. And we also realize that these variables are used in our z-score calculations. So we can write down our formula, which is x minus U over O. And because we're probably going to use this in our problem. And we can also write down that U equals 110 and O equals 25. So now, in this formula, the U obviously equals the mean and O equals standard deviation. This is actually, all of this is equal to our z-score, obviously, and the x is the score of the data. So now, part A, what percent of people aged 20 to 34 have IQ scores of over 100? So now, this problem is also asking for a percent, because it says what percent, which means we need to find the z-score, because from a z-score we can get percents with our percent from z-score chart. So now since we're finding the z-score, we can write out our formula, which is our x minus U over O. And also, since we are given these two values in the beginning, the U and the O, we can already plug those in. So we can plug those two values in first, which is the first two steps shown there. So now this problem also gives us another piece of data that we can fit into our z-score formula. It gives us the score, which it wants over 100, but the score we can plug in as 100 and use that as our x value. So obviously it wants us to find the score over 100, and we know this is the score we want our percent based on. So now that we know we want this to be the x value, we now have 3 out of our 4 variables in our equation, which means we can plug them in and do some simple algebra. So now this next step is plugging that 100 value in for the x. So now that we have these 3 values, and we know these 3 values are equal to our z-score, we can solve for these 3 values, do this simple subtraction, get a negative 10, and that's still all over 25, and that equals our negative 0.4, which will be our z-score. So now that we found our z-score, we can use our z-score chart, which is in the front few pages of our textbook, and we can look at 0.04. See if we can see it here. It's down here. 0.04, which is 34.46%. So now that we'd be like, oh, that's our answer. But as shown in this little curve here, z-scores always shade to the left. So that means we have to subtract that number by 100 to get our actual answer, because this is looking for scores above 100 and not below, and this value gives us below. So we merely take 100 and subtract the value we got, which is our 34.46, and that leaves us with our value of 65.54, which would be our answer for part A. So now moving on to part B, it asks us what percent have scores above 150. So now again, this question is asking the same thing as question A. It's asking for a percent, what percent, but now it's asking for a score above 150. So in essence, instead of using the 100 value like we did in part A, we're using a value of 150 for x. So we will use our original formula like we have, plug in our two variables, our u and our o, like we were given in the beginning, and then all we do is change the 100, like was in problem A, and change it to our 150, giving us our three variables, so we can solve for our z value. So then we do our simple subtraction, giving us our 40, and still all of this is over our o value, our 25, and then that correlates to our z value, which is a 1.6. So now again, we go back to our handy dandy chart, and we look at 1.6, and that is a 94.52, which, at first, we see that, and it looks great, like that's our answer. But, as in this, z-scores always shade to the left, so that means, and we're looking for values above 150, so in reality we have to subtract this 94.52 we have to take 100 and subtract this value from it, which will leave us with our 5.48%, which is our answer for question B. Now, moving on to question C. How high an IQ score is needed to be in the highest 25%? So now, this is much different from our A and B, because this gives us our percent, so in essence, it gives us our z-score, and it asks us for an IQ score. So it asks us for a score, which is basically our x value. So it gives us our z value, and is asking us for our x value. So from A and B, we learned that we can change percents into our z-score values, or in essence, our z-score values in percents. But now, in this problem, we have to change our percent back into a z-score value, so we can plug it into our formula. So to be in the highest 25%, that means we have to be better than 75% of other people. So and thus, we don't need to find the z-score of 25%, but we need to find the z-score of 75%. So when we do this, we go to our handy dandy z-score chart, and we look at not at the traditional z-score values, but actually the percents, and we find the closest value to 75%, which would be this, which would be our 0.07 and our 6, so in essence 0.67 right there. And then so that will be our z-score, our 0.67, that will equal our z-score. So now once we have found the z-score, which is our 0.67, we now have 3 out of our 4 variables in our z-score formula. We have our z value and our 2 others that we started with in our original problem, that our original problem gave us. So, like always, we write our formula out, and this obviously equals z. Then we plug in our 2 values, our u value and our o value that we were given in our original problem. And then we plug in our z value, which is our 0.67. So now that we have our 3 variables, our o, our u, and our z, now we need to find our x, obviously. So now we can do some simple algebra to get our x alone, and that will be our answer. So we can bring this chunk down here, and first things first, we will times both sides by 25 to get this 25 out of the denominator to try to get this x alone, and these 25s cancel out, and our 0.67 times our 25 gives us our 16.75. And then we carry our x minus 110 down, and then you add both sides, add both sides by 110 to get rid of this 110 to get our x by itself. Then our 16.75 plus our 110 will give us our 126.75, which is equal to x, which is what we were looking for, which will be our answer. Okay, so now that we have done all 3 problems and found our 3 answers, now we should be able to know how to do z-score calculation.